Um, Thank you, Professor Siti Rohana Binti Majid, Deputy Dean, Postgraduate Unit of the Faculty of Science, University Malaya. To our esteemed panel speakers, Professor Joan Leach, Puan Hazami Habib, as well as Professor Nahrizul Adib. Thank you again for participating in this forum. I'd like to thank our noted professors who are in attendance today, as well as our colleagues and our guests who are here physically, and those who are joining us on Zoom. So my name is Dr. Kenneth Fung. If you're trying to find me on Expert, my Chinese name is Dr. Fung Hong Yen. I'll leave it to you to figure out how to spell that. I come from the Department of Science and Technology Studies, and I will be moderating the event this morning. So today's forum explores the role of science communication in a post-pandemic society and what it means from the perspective of academia, industry, as well as government. So we live in a very different world than what we know of 3 years ago, okay? As the world held its breath, as we saw the first cases being reported coming out of Wuhan in December 2019, we noticed that there was a strain of coronavirus that basically was highly contagious and led to the onset of flu-like symptoms, which led to severe respiratory distress and even death. So the general perception was that, look, this is basically the next MERS, the next SARS, the next avian flu. But what we did not anticipate was how this actually turned into an unprecedented global pandemic that changed the way we saw life and our day-to-day living. From borders closing to stay-at-home orders, mandatory mask requirements, as well as national vaccine rollouts, the public was basically riveted with daily statistics, epidemiology, transmission, all of the various things that we thought that, was something that only scientific or nerds like us would pay attention to. So as the media focuses attention on all things COVID-19, the science communication community noticed an explosion of media articles or content detailing transmission, epidemiology, health practices, vaccination, which has changed the way we spoke, changed the way we behave, as well as changed the way we thought about the new normal that we are currently living in. So here to unpack all of these things, I am joined here by a panel of speakers who are highly noted. I'd like to introduce first and foremost our visitor who has traveled here, who's been all the way around the world in a little bit to be here with us in Malaysia today. Professor Joan Leach is the director of the Australian National Centre for Public Awareness of Science, which is affectionately known as CPAS, as the Australian National University in Canberra. As the oldest center for science communication in the world, the center offers undergraduate degrees as well as master's and PhD degrees in science communication. CPAS has a large fellowship program and a number of postdocs engaged in funded research programs in science communication, responsible research and innovation, as well as social studies of science. So before undertaking the directorship at CPAS, Professor Leach has had academic positions at the University of Queensland, where we met, the University of Pittsburgh, as well as Imperial College of London. Her research work includes over 75 published articles, as well as books, including An Ethics of Science Communication with Fabian Medvecki. I hope I said that right. I think so. And Science Communication, A Global Perspective, which has a very interesting chapter on Malaysia. So she feels humbled to count, I did not put this in, she feels humbled to count Dr. Kenneth Fung as one of her many students. I swear I did not put that in. Let's just give a big hand to Professor Leach for coming all the way to Malaysia. She insists that this is her first time in Malaysia. She has made many visits to our neighbors in Singapore. I told her that we are much better in many ways, and I've been waiting 13 years to welcome her here. So look forward to hosting you during your time here. Puan Hazami Habib, moving on, is currently serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, which is a think tank body which focuses on science, technology, innovation policy, and strategy. She leads the management of the Academy, which hosts about 700 different experts in science, technology, and innovation. In the years at the Academy, she has been involved in several national and international level studies and programs such as the National Astronaut Program, National Science Challenge, and so on and so forth. She's also been heavily involved in the construction of the National Science Technology Innovation Policies, all three of them. So her areas of interest and expertise is on STEM talent development policies, strategic science communication, which has been a focus area for the Academy in recent years, foresight, science diplomacy, and governance. So please join me in welcoming Puan Hazami. Last but definitely not least, our very own Dr. Nahrizul Adib bin Kadri, who graduated from the University of Malaya with a bachelor's in biomedical engineering, followed by a master's in biomedical engineering at the University of New South Wales, and then a PhD in microengineering at the University of Surrey. So his research interest is wide-ranging, from biomaterials to lab on chip, including developing medical devices that have AI innovation, I believe, as well. So since 2015, interestingly, Dr. Adib has single-handedly helped Universiti Malaya to have more than 1,200 mass media appearances. That's a lot, okay? With an approximate PR value of about 80 million ringgit, which is also a lot. So he has just recently been appointed as director of the Corporate Communications Office at Universiti Malaya. He's a firm believer that everyone has a story to tell. And please join me in welcoming the real Pakcik Bawang of Dr. Adib. So to kick things off, I would like to invite our panelists to first share their initial thoughts, general comments on today's title, as well as the experiences of your organization or yourself as in terms of communicating science within the COVID-19 context. Perhaps I'll start with Professor Leach to give your first comments.
Okay, well, hello, and thank you very, very much. Thank you so much, Kenneth, and I'm sorry it took me a long time to get here, but I plan on making up for it by eating everything in Malaysia. So thank you. Look, I was listening to your introduction and even hearing the descriptions of what we've gone through over the last 200 days, it feels like 200 years, last 2 years, 2.5 years, globally is actually still harrowing. Yeah. And I, like many of us, want to believe it's over, but we all know it's not. We're sitting here masked, hello to everyone at home that needs to be at home because we can't have big gatherings. And so I think it's really important that we continually acknowledge that we are still in this. And one of the reasons why I think this is because there is a certain fatigue setting in. We're finding it in our research, and it's very real, and it's covering everything from productivity post-COVID. Globally, productivity is down. Why is this? We were supposed to see a boost of productivity. Why is this? Well, I mean, there's growing research results saying, well, part of it is sheer fatigue. And it kind of, interestingly, fatigue with modernity that can be blamed for the pandemic. So there's a huge narrative that is happening right now. We're still in, and that we're going to have to communicate to, through, across, to come out the other side to a new place. And I do hope it's a new place. Because so in my research group, one of the things I think that has been difficult and discouraging to see over the pandemic, but that could have positive results one day, is that we see the disparity in those who have information, have access to good quality information, and those who don't. We see that alongside the global trend to income disparity and all of these other things. COVID-19, if there was ever a veil over that fact, it is gone. I think. Now that's been very difficult, I think, for a lot of sectors to kind of come to grips with, but we have to now. So what that means, I mean, I'm making a big, broad observation, but then to bring that back to how we communicate, is that COVID-19 has not just been about communicating public health, communicating epidemiology, it's been communicating around social justice and bringing science into a social justice kind of frame where it sits kind of uneasily. And that has just been huge. So it's been really, really, it's something that we've been starting to now focus our research upon, about information haves and have-nots, and also thinking about who gets to communicate science and how to bring in a different generation of science communicators. I mean, in Australia, there's a very narrow band of people who look a lot like me, who've been educated like me, who kind of communicate the science. That is not, it's no longer acceptable. It's not going to work. And so acknowledging that, I think we're in a moment where we're acknowledging that and then thinking about how to train a next generation of science communicators and to get other people coming into science with other backgrounds. Now that can be other academic backgrounds, bringing social scientists into science, sending some people who are naturally scientifically trained into the social sciences, into psychology, into communication. So we get that mixture of skills that we haven't seen. And that has kind of been, I guess that's my first reaction. We're not out yet. We've learned some really difficult truths that I think do change the way we do both research and teaching. And that we're focused now on, oh, wow, science communication has to look different. So I guess those are the three things that I just offer going into this conversation.
Thank you, Prof. Hazami, if you would like to follow up with that.
Thank you. Good morning, Assalamualaikum. I think hearing from what Dr. Joan has shared from the perspective of a think tank and a policy, during the COVID pandemic, we were given a very tall order and a very huge task. We were given 2 weeks to come up with the program immunization, the national immunization program, whereby during that time we were given 3 months for the Ministry of Health to come up with the program. So with that, how to communicate? When I talk to 800 experts in the academy, which all of them are scientists from all sort of disciplines, they will give me all sort of scientific articles and references, and how I'm going to translate this to the policymakers to make them understand and how to make things in order, and for the whole country to follow the program. I give you one example. When we want to decide senior citizen Malaysia for COVID-19 program for vaccination, we have 3 different views. One ministry said 75 and above, one ministry said 65 and above, another ministry said 60 and above. So we are given task to come up with a national program. I said, make up your mind, 75, 65, 60, because that will become the guideline. And that will be how the public will react upon, because vulnerable groups is the senior citizen, right? So these are things that we are doing at the academy. At the same time, that is how we want to communicate with the policymakers. Then we are communicating with the public. During that time, everybody is a pseudo-scientist. They give all sort of views. We don't know which one is fake, which one is true. And we are given the task at the academy to vet through things coming, whether it's fake or true, through our experts. So that is another way how to communicate. Then with the public, we also communicate with the media, because media is the medium for public to get, even though today's social media is the direct kind of platform that goes to the public, but in Malaysia, we still read and we still watch TV, national TVs and others, radio, things like that. And we have to educate the media, because if they have a wrong source of understanding of the pandemic issues, then all the public will have a wrong interpretation. So we even tell the media, there is a difference between treats and cure. But to media, treats mean cure means treat. But to scientists, it's different. But how do we distinguish the difference when they wrote an article in the newspaper, or when they speak up in the public forum and things like that? The message is clear. Because it doesn't mean that you get vaccination, you get vaccinated, you will not get COVID. But it may reduce the symptom. It may reduce the effect. So this thing needs to be communicated clearly and don't hide anything to public. So that is another challenge that we face at the academy. Then we also speak to the industry. Do you remember during the COVID, we have shortage of ventilator, shortage of PPE. We cannot import. Everything stagnant, the whole world. Then the scientists said, oh, we can do PPE, 3D printing. Suddenly, everybody is very creative and innovative, but have to speak up to the industry for them to do the mass production. And we managed to do that. Same with ventilator. Oh, we can develop our own ventilator. So this is where experts start communicating with industry in the language that industry can understand. So that is very important. So that is three things. Now, what we are doing, the academy said, look, we have to take care of our planet because this does not stop, just like what she said just now. And this pandemic will come. If you see trends throughout 20 years, how many new disease that has been occur and reimagine again into our life. So academy put up another plan post-pandemic for us to come up with a planetary health action plan. To take care of our planet, we formed 2 special interest groups at the academy on COVID-19 and zoonosis and start talking to each other. And the problem in Malaysia, even scientists, policymakers, ministries, we are not talking to each other. Everybody is in their own sphere. So what academy is doing now is communicating and connecting. So that is my intro of what we are doing in the academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Hazami. I'm going to move on to Dr. Adib for his view.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I would like to stand. Because in branding, in communicating, there's one trick that I learned from a communication expert. You need to make it something memorable. Okay, so whatever simple thing that you can do, make it memorable. I once went to a forum. My partner performed a magic trick. I cannot beat that. Okay, I tried to learn one on YouTube yesterday, but sorry. Maybe next time. Okay, maybe if you can invite me for a next session, you can do a magic trick. Anyhow, thank you, Kenneth, for a very good introduction just now. Actually, even I can't describe myself well, because if you listen to the introduction, I have a background in engineering. I'm a lecturer by profession. People say that, wow, congratulations, you become the director of corporate comms. But to an academician, that's not a promotion. You know, I only get like, well, I can tell you how much allowance I got, but it's not exactly a promotion to a professor. Okay, but for me, it's more than that. It's a chance for me to be with the university's community, to tell our stories. Because I think the organizers have done a good job of inviting us 3 here, because all of us here came from totally different areas. We can talk to each other, we use the same language, but definitely our experiences are quite different. And for that, I would like to thank the organizer for having all of us here, so that we can share different stories when you go back home. I keep on saying the word stories this morning because that's where I came from. And I think that's what I would like to contribute here today. Yeah, because I believe that everything starts with a story. I was telling our guests here at the waiting room that how is it that everyone knows about the Cinderella story, not knowing who wrote the first version of it, but we don't care. We just know that in one fateful night, with the help of this fairy godmother, the Cinderella can become beautiful and have all the perks of a princess, and went to this ball. Yeah, and we knew that every one of us here knew that at 12 midnight, she needs to go back home, because otherwise people knew who the real Cinderella was. That's one. Secondly, I shared with them, how is it that we knew the story about the Alibaba and the 40 thieves? That story is actually originated from the times of the old civilization in Iraq, the Baghdad, where they burned down the library last time. So that was the story during those times, and yet it persists until today. And in fact, no matter how you tell it, no matter how you adapt it to your culture, even Filamli make a movie out of it and use it in his own Bujang Lapuk universe, and still relevant. We know who Morgana is, and we knew who she is, the role she played in the story. Yeah. So what I'm telling is, to communicate, we need tools. And even the word communication itself is defined differently by different people. Perhaps I'm glad here we have Prof. Leach here, who actually teach how to communicate. There's a whole science to it, to communicate. And I came from a background of engineering. I have no experience whatsoever in media or communications. But for me, I can see certain patterns, certain themes when I do communication, whether it's in the popular culture, whether it's in academic, whether it's policy. There's always a theme. You need to start with something, and the middle, you explain something, and in the end, you hope for something. That's the basic 3 things. And did you know that that's also the basic 3 acts in all Shakespeare's plays? Shakespeare always use 3 acts. It always starts with the introduction of the characters. It follows up with a conflict, and it ended with a resolution of some sort. And if you look at all Harry Potter's movies, all Star Wars movies, all box office movies from Hollywood, actually they followed one simple formula. And I think most of you who are familiar with communication will know the term hero's journey. We all use the same thing, where the protagonist will be sent somewhere, lost in somewhere, and then you, with the help of a mentor or something older, knowledgeable figure, he managed to go back and fight the adversary, whatever adversary that is. It could be environment, could be monster, could be anything. So if you look back at all these movies, you will notice that there is a pattern to this. And why do we keep on excited to be told the same story? Why? I don't know. Should we know? I don't know. But why not we use this as a tool to convey something, to tell something? And it always starts with a story. And I kept on telling everyone that I met that all of you have a story to tell. Why don't we start telling them today? I always believe in this one old Chinese proverb. I don't know whether it's Chinese or not. Okay, Kenneth can verify this for me. There's a saying that the best time to plant a fruit tree is 40 years ago, and the second best time is today. Yep, so why don't we start telling our stories today, wherever it is, your own social media, not just the social media, but on your own. We have a place, we have the power actually to tell our stories. And if you guys have been following our Universiti Malaya Instagram or Facebook page, you'll notice that my office have started to feature all these different kinds of people. And every Friday, I make it a day to feature somebody who are not seen. I don't want to use the word unsung heroes because that's kind of too much, but they are true heroes in their own sense. This week, I will, it's just a teaser. This week, I will feature somebody who is a truly magnificent. He's just a normal staff. He's a musician at we have a Faculty of Creative Arts because we employ musicians, but their pay grade is very low. I mean, about B21 or something. Myself is 54. People, senior lecturer, Kenneth is
51.
51. So it's very low. And yet, this person has contributed a lot to the music industry in Malaysia. So I will feature him that. So in UM, we have this kind of people. Okay, I would like to share them this week. And maybe next week, we have another interesting figure in library. Whenever you people mention library, we will notice the librarian, perhaps at the office upstairs, or the guy at the counter who deals with the borrowing and the return of the books. That's about as much people you know about library. But did you know that there's a person who's probably sitting at her desk all day long at the back who are looking at the binding of the books? Because we have all sorts of precious books, old books in the library. We need somebody to take care of them. And this, well, there's a group of them, but I'm going to pick one of them who takes care of this binding of the books. Who would know that there's a job specific to that task, which I think is very, very important. Otherwise, the book will, get damaged and will not be useful anymore. So my mission in UM as the Director of Corporate Comms is to continue being the bridge or the mediator. Or that's why Kenneth mentioned the Pakcik Bawang. Pakcik Bawang is like a storyteller. Okay, that's my own term, by the way. I coined it like 2 years ago. So I would like my office and myself to be the storyteller of UM's people, campus-wide community, and that will be my introduction to this session. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Dr. Adib. So before I jump into my next question, there's a little bit of background about myself. I came back to Malaysia in 2009 after spending about 1.5 years under the tutelage of Professor Leach. I started my career essentially in communications and journalism, primarily in pharma biotech for a few years. I worked on Bio Borneo, which is where I went to SBC. I was with Bioeconomy Corporation for a little bit, went to DC for Bio Convention and things like that. Then decided to do my PhD, which is why I disappeared from this face of the earth for a little bit. But what I've noticed when I came back was the fact that I had to explain what was science communication to everyone, because it was such a small field, not many people knew of it. But what we noticed in recent years was that there has been an urgency in things like STEM education. And we have seen a number of activities in public awareness and public engagement in science. In Malaysia, it has been spearheaded by mainly from the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. So right now, we would like to talk about the growth of science communication in recent years, specifically with relation to opportunities that emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic as we see more people being sensitized to issues of science communication. Perhaps we can start with Puan Hazami to discuss about the situation in Malaysia and what are the efforts of ASM.
Thank you. Even though you said science communication is a small field, but it's a very important field. Knowledge without communicating it well is useless. It's just for us, right? So in Malaysia, we have been, in academy, we have been pursuing this over and over again. And we are trying to mainstream it, but we start at the education level. We are promoting this inquiry-based science education, IBSE. We learned this model from a French Academy of Science since 2001. And we try to give these special skills to science teachers for them to communicate science in a very interactive manner. Because Dr. Joan, in Malaysia, especially in Asian culture, we are not used to ask questions. We are not used to inquire things. So in the classroom, everything is one way. I give, you hear. You read the textbook. If possible, memorize each sentence in it. Straight A's. But once you throw problems to them, they got stuck. This is not in the textbook. That's how science education is. So we need to change that. So how we did that in 2001, we do this big congress, we call all this. Then we talk to Ministry of Education. We have been practicing this. Are you sure? Because it's a very one way. So now in science, STEM education, we have this formal education in school whereby they give all the basic knowledge, but we encourage the informal education. This is where all the science centers, all the co-curriculum activities that need the other paradigm of how learning science that's more exciting. So that is the things that we are moving since 2001. And the journey goes long until 2017. Then only we managed to convince Ministry of Education to form this National STEM Center. We learned this from UK. They have their National STEM Center, whereby they retrain our science teacher to have this science communication skill and start interacting and using the pedagogy of inquiry-based science education. The more questions you get from your students, that means higher inquisivity and higher interest. So that is the indicator. And we need that to be prolonged into the tertiary level. So that's how we push this agenda of science communications. Then we start communicating. In academy, we have around 450 over fellows. Fellows is a very senior, right? And it's not easy. We give them this, we call it fellows lecture, but it's always among their peers. Who hears this beyond their peers? So since 2018, we changed the format. No more academic lectures, we said. What they do? Tell a story, 18 minutes, like TED Talk. But they are all seniors. We need to train them at least 3 days. Not easy. We bring a young scientist to train them. Oh, no. Their ego said, who is him to teach me? But it's reality. But first year, tough. Second year, when they see the impact, they start accepting it. Now more and more academic fellow is going through science communication training because scientists need to be a good communicator. If not, we don't understand your knowledge. I have 12 volumes of report on water and I need to present 10 slides to PM this morning. I said, how to translate 12 volume to 10 slides? And that slide cannot be too wordy. You know, human concentration, 30 seconds. More than that, it goes somewhere else. Especially Prime Minister, when they start holding the handphone, that means they have no interest.
We might have to cut that part up.
Yeah.
Continue.
Okay, so that's how things, science communication progress. When we got the approval from the government to have the Science National STEM Center for Teachers, I said, our battle halfway there. Now what we want is to embed this curriculum in all tertiary levels, just like ethics. Ethics in research, we want it to be embedded. Same with science communication, because these are all soft skills that is needed for us to become more relevant as a scientist in the future. Because public is demanding more and more things from the scientists, especially when we use public funds. But if we don't communicate it well, they don't see public research going for public good. So without communicating, less and less budget for scientists if we cannot translate it to make them understand. So that is the challenge. Latest Academy just launched our science communication module. So when we launched that, we have this Fame Lab competition. 2 of Malaysians won the global level or the international level. We use both of them because they are academies, young scientists network members. They form a group, they brainstorm. It takes them 4 years to come up with these modules. Now we want to spread this module, use it in the faculty, everywhere. And we want it to go beyond Malaysia. So we also have this young scientist network at the ASEAN level. So my strategy in academy is to target the young scientists. They are more flexible, more acceptable, and more taking up new challenges. So they don't feel awkward to do TikTok. You think it's easy to do TikTok 30 seconds to make people watch? What the hell are you doing? It's not easy to compress a message within 30 seconds or 1 minute. It's easy to give lecture for 2 hours. Okay, so that's what Academy is doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Hazami. Perhaps Dr. Adib would like to add a little bit extra color into the Malaysian experience so far.
I'll try my best, Kenneth, can't promise. But I would like to follow up on what Puan Hazami has said just now about communication. Coming from somebody who has no background in media and communications. Another aspect about communication, apart from the actual message to be conveyed on, is I believe in my experience, is also the timing, opportunity. Good stories might sound good, but have you noticed that it's told at a specific time, that it's nice to be told, it's nice to be accepted, it's nice to be whatever. A very simple example is children's stories are told to children, when they are little, and not to adults, for example. Folk tales are only told to the kids and only told at a certain venues, for example. And for me, that's a very important aspect. I don't know whether it's taught in the course or not because I'm not from there, but I firmly believe that a good good message needs to have good timing designed into it as well. Yeah, I'm doing it in a bit. I just remember that I have this in my pocket. Yesterday, I met a real NASA scientist yesterday. Yeah? But if surprisingly, he never been to space. Of course, going to space is a very unique experience. Not all scientists get the chance to go to space. His work is more on the atmospheric chemistry. He works on air pollution. Yeah, but he always starts with the statement that I work for NASA. I work for NASA. Everywhere he goes, he said, I work for NASA. And for me, that's the timing aspect of your storytelling, because that logo opens up the opportunity. And when we talk about opportunity, people always say that, oh, we miss the opportunity, we miss that, oh, I don't know how to create one. Actually, each one of us can create one if you keep on practicing telling stories. You'll notice that, when the eyes start to glimmer, the eyes start to light up, that's when best to tell your stories. And today, I know that I'm in the Faculty of Science. I would like to share with you that our social media today will feature a PhD student from the Department of Chemistry, who is working on, I learned this last week, I hope I pronounced it right, oxo biodegradable rubber. I hope I pronounced it right, because OXO is actually a brand of detergent. I don't know whether it's Australia or UK, I can't remember. But the students working on OXO biodegradable rubber, which actually tries to help as an option for the rubber industry waste management. So I'm just creating opportunity here for myself to promote my Instagram. Not mine, the university one, that the student from this faculty will be featured today. So there you go. I'm creating opportunity for my story. So I'm telling you that the opportunity always lies everywhere. You can create one only if you train yourself to be able to tell all these little signals that the time is right for you to tell the story. And by the way, the Thor movie, it was delayed. We don't know why, because I think the timing is not right. Yeah, I don't know. That's the reason of the distributor, of course. But again, that's another example to tell you that even good stories need a good time to be told. Yeah, and sorry, I just remembered something. When you talk about in Malaysia, the media doesn't understand between the cure and the treatment. In fact, the problem is even worse when you speak in Malay. And coming from Malay language itself, we have all these not cumbersome, I shouldn't say that, with the challenges of the cultural differences, of how we brought up and so on. Because for example, I give a simple example of when you have a headache, what do? We take Panadols, yes, but Panadols don't treat you. And in fact, the headaches is not even a disease. It's just a symptom of something else. Maybe you're just stressed out and all you need to do is just to sit down and take a sip of water, But the marketing is so good that they have these words in Malay recently. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for headache. Makan. And it's as if this is the miracle thing that can cure you. Yeah? It's not even a sickness in the first place, you see? So when talking about science, we are bombarded with all these things, not just challenges about not doing the communicating, but also all these other challenges that we are facing. But what I'm trying to share here is that we can use stories as a tool. And to do that, we need to identify the right time to tell these stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adib. Just to expand it a little bit, give us a more international perspective. Perhaps Joan, you could just.
I feel like I'm going to be academic and boring after those two exciting. Look, I mean, I think science communication, very broad church of activities. So, talked about STEM education. That's not, what I do necessarily, although my center kind of spun out Questacon, which is the National Science Center in Australia about 30 years ago. So we're engaged in those things, but almost as a second order. So there's a kind of, we don't do the engagement, but we do the research that lets us inform what quality engagement might be. And you talk about timing. Well, we might do some research to talk about that timing. And I think that's another part of science communication that's kind of exploded over the last bit. The idea that not just that communication is a set of hints and tips in order to be able to kind of stand up and get your message across, but actually there's a social dynamic between science and society that needs to be understood before you can even talk about those hints and tips. I guess it's like almost like a prior kind of discussion. And I know that's what a lot of the STS work that goes on here also does. So I think that has really exploded. To come back to your COVID context, one of the things in the field of science communication from a public point of view, so we've talked about the scientific point of view, you've talked a little about representing scientists and mediating, but flipping it around and from the public point of view, what do people think about X? Became a really important question over the last sort of 20 years. So do people like genetically modified tomatoes? Well, I found out very early in my career, no, they don't. And they were pouring the tins out in car parks. So no, they don't like that. Concerns about gene editing are still quite big in Australia. I don't know here. I'd love to hear more about that. I think, you know, there's a kind of unsettling questions that publics want to ask about science. So right before I left Australia, big discussion around many Australians have 2 doses of a vaccine and are boosted. That's my situation. And basically, there's a fatalism coming over everyone saying, well, you know what, doesn't matter. You're going to get COVID anyway. It's a matter of when, not if. Luckily, the vaccines will keep you out of the hospital, reduce incidence of mortality, but you may still get pretty sick, even with 2 doses and a booster. Now, we have a situation where people are saying, oh yeah, you're going to come up with another vaccine, are you? Okay, and this one's going to be sensitive to, you know, all of the Omicron variants maybe, or maybe some others, maybe we can have a universal vaccine. And people are like, really? And to be honest with you, I don't think that's an unrealistic view, right? It's not. So we need to be able to flip that to the public point of view. I mean, I kind of have this point, I mean, if I'm in a grumpy mood, saying, really? I mean, I've been vaccinated, I've been boosted, and I'm still going to get this thing? And so I understand it, but that listening that has to come from a public point of view. One of the things that I think science communication got a little bit entrenched in doing in terms of its research methodologies is polling people. So I don't know if you do a lot of that here at all, like, you know, what are public attitudes toward, you know, yeah, okay, 67% of people say that they're going to go get a booster. Okay, well, what we found during COVID was those were really, really bizarre, right? Like what people said they were going to do and what they actually did, the disparity was quite large. Okay, now why is that? I think it's an interesting question. We got very reliant on this kind of very, what I would call a shallow methodology of polling publics about their attitudes, instead of doing kind of the deeper work that I was talking to one of your colleagues about citizen science, where, you know, you're actually working with communities to kind of understand the deep stories that communities tell about themselves and about their attitudes toward things. And that's a kind of a richer way to study the context for which science communication can work. And I think COVID's kind of shown us that. And so I think globally, there's a bit of an explosion of thinking about new methodologies, deeper methodologies than just polling publics about attitudes. Because in fact, that wasn't so great. Didn't tell us what we probably wanted to know. So look, I think it's an exciting time for science communication because we can go a lot deeper to understand from the public point of view, not what experts want to tell people. I know a lot about what experts want to tell people. Okay, so I started my career 30 years ago. People in the US and then in the UK, and people hated to see me come. It's like, oh my God, it's that woman again who's going to talk about how we should communicate science. Oh, geez, I just wish she'd go away. Now, I basically don't put my name on my office door because so many experts will beat down my door to say, hey, really, we have to have caps on our workshops because so many experts want to get their message out. So that's great. That's fabulous. I think that's wonderful, but those experts also need to learn to listen. And that's the next challenge, right? We've got to kind of, you know, challenge after challenge. It's okay, things are going to get better, right? But we have to kind of now, I think, crack that, which is really, really difficult, and get experts to realize it's not just the push of information. It's actually what publics want to know. And what publics want to know might not be what you want to tell them. And in many cases, it is not. So it's all of that stuff, I think, that is now exploding. And that's why I think it's an exciting time to research in the area, because methods can be deeper and not these shallow kind of methods.
Thank you, Joan. I want to touch a little bit more, expand a little bit more on what you just said earlier about fatigue, especially with regards to vaccines, because what we've also noticed during this period is an alternative view. That's not just what the government tells us is right or wrong. I mean, especially with social media coming around, what we notice is that everything gets so much more louder. There's so much more noise surrounding us. And we get things like the anti-vax movement coming out in certain parts of the world. We have people who refuse to wear masks. We have people expounding on the benefits of ivermectin as a drug for COVID-19. Alternative medicines, I think, especially in Malaysia, I think that's pretty common as well. Somebody, I'm not going to mention his name, mentioned injecting bleach. Yeah, I remember he said injecting. I think he said injecting bleach as a way to combat COVID-19. But this is the issue with the world that we live in today, right? We have to battle misinformation, disinformation. Like you said earlier, Puan Hazami, pseudoscience versus evidence-based science. So I'm going to start by getting the opinion of someone who's on the very front lines, interacting with the public directly as a scientist. Dr. Adib, would you like to take a stab at this first?
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Not sure whether I will help the discussion along, but I'll try my best. It's interesting that you picked on the word misinformation. But did you notice that misinformation will only become misinformation if you look at it this way? To the other side, it's just information. Yeah, and information or message or whatever you call it, stories or whatnot, it's just a thing. When you use it and how you use it will determine its usefulness or whatever you call it later on. And you can only see whether it's a benefit or not after the advantage of time. Yeah? So for me, I would like to, since I'm from the story kind of guy here, yeah, I would like to offer the usefulness of stories in this. Why not we keep on telling our own stories? Because as far as I know, things like search engine, Google, Facebook is all, nowadays is considered a search engine by itself. And my wife is a very good Facebook user. Whenever I want to know, actually nowadays it's become routine to me every time I go back from work. So I will ask her what's hot now. So she'll Google Facebook. No, I shouldn't use Google Facebook. She used Facebook to look up what's happening now. In fact, when I read a news title saying that a certain person has been convicted of something, I just asked my wife, who is this person? And she will find it in the comments of Facebook posts. So that is how good Facebook is now. You can find answers to your question in a snap of a finger in Facebook. So what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about misinformation, train ourselves to understand that it's just another information owned by somebody else. So why not we start owning our own information, our own stories? And where do we start? With what you have around you, your stories, your achievement, whichever things that you find is correct, share that opinion, because that can only become true if other people say it's true. And other people can't say it's true if there's not enough things to say about it. And Google search engine is built upon a very simple algorithm, although it's not being exposed. But the understanding is that if a lot of people talk about it, it must be true. If a lot of people talk about ivermectin as a solution to COVID, then that's the truth. Because in the old times, that is how we communicate. We talk about things that matters a lot more than things that are of a lesser value. So, but as we all know, living in the digital era, that might not be true at all times. You know, people might talk about silly things. People might start talking about something out of a perception of something, and that becomes the word viral now. And the algorithm still thinks that, oh, this could be important. And the worst is because you must remember that all social media are built upon profit. Okay, of course it's free, but it's built upon profit. It's a business nevertheless, and their business is revolving around how long each of us stayed on their app. So they devise the algorithm so that you want to read something that you want to read. Okay, of course, over time they can sort of predict what kind of things you would like to read, you like to click the like button or to share or to put comments on. And over time, the engine can tell, oh, this person will stay longer if I show them this. So over time, without knowing whether it's a misinformation or correct or wrong information, because remember, Facebook, Instagram, and all of this boils down to profit. They want to make money, and how they make money is to make sure all of us stay glued to our phones as long as possible. And they know that by sharing with you the right stories for you to engage. Whether it's right or wrong is immaterial to the company. So it's been left to us, all of us, not just us here, all of us, to actually start sharing our stories and stop. Actually, there's a way to do that. You know, you just stop following all these accounts and start following me, for example. Dr. Leach here or another me here. So that the algorithm will start to understand, oh, these people's views are the more value than the ones that you've been reading before. So that's my answer to that. And in fact, oh, sorry, I just remembered something. And when we talk about stories, it doesn't have to be the verbal one or the written ones. I just showed you a logo and you all know that's a very important company in the world. Sorry, organization. It's not a company, it's a government organization. But that's just another example that shows that communication can be at any level and any form. And in fact, that decision is made by you. Do you know that? I can give you some simple example, and it's quite beautiful because it's traditional and yet it's scientific. Hazami can vouch me on that. I think everyone here knows about this is a Malay children poem. It's called Buah Cempedak di Luar Pagar, Ambil Galah Tolong Jolokkan. It's about, that's the opening verses, which tells about a fruit, kind of jackfruit, a cousin to jackfruit. Very nice, strong smell. But this particular fruit, actually, what do you call? The fruit appears at the roots. It's not at the branches. For somebody who doesn't know this fruit, will say that, oh, I smell something. Or must be at the tree outside. So I need to use a something long, a wooden pole. Sorry, thank you, Kenneth. Good science communication. You must be proud.
Walking dictionary.
So you need to use a pole because fruit trees in Malaysia normally fruits at the branches, and you need to use a pole to get it. But for somebody who doesn't know, they smell something and say, oh, I need to find my pole. Where's my pole? So jolok di luar pagar, not knowing that the fruit is actually at the roots. So that poem is beautiful because it's recited by everyone in Malaysia. Everyone in Malaysia knows this. And yet there's a scientific twist to it. So for me, that's really beautiful because that's a proof that communication, when we talk about scientific communication being important now, actually it's been done so long ago. It's just that people don't realize it. The timing and the concept and the packaging. And I believe if we can empower everyone to tell their stories in whatever way and means they can, I think this can be done. This can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Adib. Perhaps, Joan, you would like to come into this one?
I think that's the question I've been asked most since the beginning of the pandemic is what do we do about misinformation? So some of my colleagues have done some really interesting research. So let me just kind of give some broad strokes of what they found. You mentioned disinformation. So, you know, in this world of information, and I love your line about how it's just all information, but of course academics have to kind of carve it up, you know. The notion of disinformation is that someone's actively being mischievous. Okay, right? They're putting out something they know to be false, and they're doing so to persuade you to do something or to cause mischief. And so one of my colleagues looked at disinformation, which is rampant globally. I don't know quite the dynamics here in Malaysia. I know better in Australia and the US and a bit in Europe around sort of foreign state actors, basically sowing discord, okay? So they will go in and they'll amplify on social media the ivermectin story. They will, lots of anti-vaccine messages, and they put them in there not because they care whether you get a vaccination or not, but just to cause social unrest, right? So cause discord, and that makes the information ecology a bit difficult to manage, right? So they're all it's hard for any kind of good messages to get through this kind of morass of. Yeah, and so so my colleagues have done quite a bit of research on that and the impacts that it has. So even political messages where they're sowing social unrest, then find power in sort of scientific arenas. And that was their big finding. It was covered in the New York Times. It was great research. So that's one of the things we're up against. Okay, that's disinformation, and that's a substantial amount of stuff out there, and there's very little we can do about it. I mean, right? I can't, as academics or, we don't have the power to intervene in, other parts of the world and the political matters there. So that is a real challenge. And I think it's very difficult to get at that. Then there's misinformation. And that's when people are spreading stuff that maybe experts think is bad information. And here, I think that a different set of themes are starting to emerge about maybe not counteracting it, right? This is what people say to me. They say, oh, well, how do you counteract misinformation? Like, if I just tell people the truth, I kind of notice that they don't care, right? They just kind of walk away, right? So what are we going to do about that? And I think the key actually is in something that you said, and it's this ability to keep talking, right? To keep the conversation going. Because it isn't, going against misinformation isn't a one-off opportunity. It's not that you put out the right stuff and then it's all, it's problem solved. It's about Scheherazade, part of 1001 Nights, where, right? I probably haven't pronounced her in the way that, yeah, 1001 Nights, Scheherazade, her power is to keep people talk, keep the story going, keep the conversation happening, and she bases her life on this, right? And in a sense, I think that's our position. We have got to keep the conversation going, and that means maybe having a conversation where people are telling us stuff we don't want to hear, or maybe there is a story that includes traditional medicines and vaccines. These are the kinds of I think where we're at now, and how we can do this globally. I mean, this is huge. I don't think it differs probably too much in the sense that we just have to keep the conversation going. It isn't one piece of scientific information that's going to fix things. And in fact, our research has shown that as soon as you address a bit of a misinformation, you've actually just lost that person, okay? You have alienated that person. So no, you're wrong. Let me tell you what it's really all about. It's over, okay? Now what you've done is even worse than where we started. It's now impossible to have that conversation. So the conversation has to it can't be corrective, I guess is what I'm saying. And so so we found that pretty strongly in our research. So those are two big things. The disinformation stuff, I wish I had some optimism, but that's, global politics that might be beyond me. And then there's the misinformation, and I think it's really about keeping the conversation going.
Thanks, Joan. Puan Hazami, would you like to bring it all back to Malaysia? And yeah.
Okay. I think I agree with both panels. Okay. So information is information, but perseverance and persistence in communicating continuously. The problem is when we face misinformation during COVID, when my minister said, how are we going to curb all this fake news? I said, we cannot combat all. It's a lot. Let's say you label 3 is fake and then you post it through the ministry's website. There were another thousands coming up. So if we cannot keep on firefighting like this, then the whole government resources will do just reading all the social media and doing nothing else, right? But scientifically, what our experience is, we do this sentiment analysis. During this COVID-19, what people want is, How to solve this problem? We cannot get out. The mortality is getting higher and higher. It's infected. My life is not normal anymore. And we don't even know what is normal life anymore. Right? So after we do this sentiment analysis from the social media, then we understand what is their fear. What is their fear? What is their needs? And then we keep on giving the facts to them. That's the supply and demand concept. But we have to have data scientists to work round the clock 24/7 to understand this. Then we have to segregate between what happening outside Malaysia and what happening inside Malaysia for us to localize the issue. Don't mix it up. Just like you said, what happened in US, we cannot control. But it affects our society because we read. I said, oh, US, they never use mask. Why we need to wear mask? Even my colleague from ministry attending United Nations meeting or UNESCO meeting, when he entered the room and everybody is looking at him because he's wearing mask. So how do we communicate this thing and how do we bring this? We need to have a systematic and tactical approach in communicating by understanding the needs. I agree, it is a two-way communication. If I talk to my fellow scientists in the academy, everybody is an expert. Hazami, this one can be take care. A, B, C, D. Hello? Communicate this. What is this A, B, C, D? Right? You know, you have the solution, but we have to communicate it. But this is trial in the lab. I said, alamak. You see, scientists think all that. But when you go to the reality, to the policy level, we have to make sure. I'll give you an example. Okay. You remember Pasir Gudang and Sungai King Kim incident? Everybody is looking at the sungai, at the river. There's a big pollution in Johor, nearby Singapore. Right? 2,000 students infected. Then during that time, my minister is Yin. He said, I want to fight this with facts. What happened? Why this pollution make all the student hysteria? 2,000 students, around 1,000 hysteria. They put everybody in the stadium. One girl shouting, another 10 shouts. This got nothing to do with pollution. Right? Then we send our scientists to the field. Collect data. My God, collect data in Malaysia like don't know what. I have to knock 14 ministries and agencies to get data. We said, give us 6 months data of pollution of the river and air. All this while the media, the ministry has said, okay, get budget, clean up the river. Make sure there is no evaporations and it will, you know, whatever we inhale, it affects the students surrounding the area. But when we see the data, the scientists said, Hazami, the only students that is affected is at level 2 and level 3. Ground level and first floor, everybody is fine. What's wrong? Then I said, it's not coming from the river. It's coming from the air. Then we get a data. How many factory in Pasir Gudang? 468. How many chemical factory in Pasir Gudang? 268. Wow. Get the air pollution report for the back of 6 months. Then we do a data tabulation. Then we know it's not the river. It is from the stack up of the factory. We reported this to the ministry. Oh, we are looking at the wrong place. But how to communicate this to the public? We already spent 6 million cleaning the river. I said, river need to be clean. It is polluted. Right? But we need to tackle the issue. How to communicate this to the media? Say, ministry said, okay, we'll tackle this. They put all the sensors at all 263 factories at the stack up to make sure that they don't release unwanted things, chemical things. And they release it after rain because they want the gas to go down. And only scientists can tell this. But when they say so jargon, I don't understand. I am a public person. I said, please tell me what is the problem. They gave me all sorts of chemical things. I said, I don't want to know that. Then only they tell the story, then only we understand. Then only we can explain it to the ministry and tackling the problem. This is where communication is very important. So when we did that, then our scientists said, we should tell this to the media. But in science communication, in policy, what is important is build up trust. It's not to build superstar or diva. Ministry said, please, we already take the actions as an academy, an agency, an independent agency. I said, okay, yeah, you even open a branch of environmental department in that area just to monitor. We are happy with it, right? So I said, okay. Then I said, but we need to share this to the public. How to do that? I have to go through a process. After a year, then only they give us the green light for us to tell the story. Then it got front line of all newspapers. Then I said, oh, it's not the river. Right? So this is where science communication, bringing it at the right time, building up trust, because academy have to build up the reputation that we are independent and we are based on evidence base. We don't just do theoretical things and then just, or my assumption, no. Scientists does not think in that manner. That's one thing I learned working in the academy, and I appreciate it very much. So how to communicate this and build up trust? With that trust, things that is fake, misinformation, they will push it up and they will start searching reliable person, organization that can share the right information. We need to mushroom this kind of people. Then only we can combat misinformation or disinformation. But it is a movement. Everybody have to play a role. Especially people with knowledge, the scientists. If you cannot tell, please, when you attend meeting at the ministry level or children's or students, I appreciate jargon, but jargon that people can understand. The more jargon you put, more confused. First meeting I attend in the academy on biotechnology, I can't even take any notes. Because I don't understand. Right? Everybody put out, I don't even know how to spell it. So complicated. But at the end of the day, what you want to pass down to people that want to do, the doer, and for them to have a better understanding, because at the end of the day, what we need is not just awareness, it's beyond awareness. We want them to have interest and opinion and start engaging. That is the end game of science communication. So if we have that spirit, we can take over any misinformation, but everybody have to have that spirit. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Pon. That leads us to our very last question for today. I could go on. I could go on talking about this for the next 2 hours, but I'm pretty sure nobody wants to hear me talk about it. But as we come to the end, we would like to talk a little bit about way forward. Okay. So when we look back at what we've learned so far, and we think about what we want to see, perhaps in the next 3, next 5 years, I mean, that's something that everybody has been touching on a little bit. But perhaps with just concluding remarks, can we talk about what are the lessons we've learned and what do we expect to see in the future? So Joan, would you like to get going with this one?
So I think one of the good things that will come out of this episode is the sort of acknowledgement of work across the disciplines. So, epidemiology, synthetic biology, in developing the vaccine, psychology, health communication, like all of this stuff, right? I mean, in order to get where we are, there's had to been a team effort. And I think people appreciate that. And so I think more interdisciplinary work where the social sciences are actually contributing, not as, oh, here we have a message, now go out there and communicate it, but actually, wait a minute, let's sit down and do a bit of a needs analysis. What do people want? What will they accept? Those kinds of questions coming first. And that's already happening. Some of the projects I'm involved in are trying to do that now, because there's so many examples, right? From golden rice to, of scientists inventing things that people don't want. Okay, and I think I think we can move beyond that, and so I'm really quite excited about the possibilities there in this team kind of thing. I think going forward, I just loved what you just said about engagement and getting people to ask questions. Okay, well then the next step is tolerating dissent. Yeah. Because with real true engagement, we are going to disagree. There's a place for rational people of goodwill to disagree. And so how do we disagree respectfully? So I say, okay, you don't want gene editing, but boy, this community over here really wants the clinical benefits of gene editing. How are we going to move forward? Okay, those kinds of difficulties. And I think that's where we're headed. Now, you know, because you were so optimistic, it makes me feel optimistic. Even though the cultures that I come from right now are in disarray, where people cannot disagree respectfully. Okay, I mean, it is. I just visited my parents in the US after 2.5 years. I don't travel to the US very often, and maybe once or twice a year for the last 20 or so years. I collaborate with researchers, but this time I was actually out, you know, interacting with a wide variety of people. I was shocked. Okay, it is a divided country, and I know people write about it, but I felt it for the first time. And there are aspects of Australia that are a bit that way too. So that's our challenge. How does science fit into this, where we can disagree respectfully? And boy, if we can solve that, I think that would be a huge step forward. And maybe if COVID continues to be a common enemy, we can unite around, you know, battling that common enemy. Yeah.
Thanks, Joan. Dr. Adib, would you like to add your comments on this?
All right, since this is the last question, so allow me to sit and also talk a bit more philosophically sounding. I think everyone here agrees that one of the reasons why humans are at the top food chain is because we can do stuff that other creatures can't. And obviously one of it is the ability to dream, to have ideas, to have something else, but you can act upon it. We have these appendages called hands and feet and whatever else, and we can do something about it. And another aspect of that is we can share it using our powers of communication. We can share that. I think humans can be considered as the top predators on Earth and the top manipulators of Earth resources because of that. And continuing on the note from about asking questions, it's also a matter of our nature, the world, how the universe works. Part of it is about supply and demand, or how we define it. It's actually in coming from scientific background in engineering, we understand that energy is constant. Yeah, energy is constant, but for some reason, what held it together is so many factors, and one of it, we knew that entropy is always increasing. But for some reason, we need to conserve the energy, and we found that to be true all over the universe. Yeah. So having that in mind, I think the term fighting misinformation, or how can we resolve a discord or whatever challenges that we have, I think needs to go beyond that. If we understand that we need to have that disagreement for us to live peacefully, I think that's the biggest challenge that we need to address. It's actually, disagreement is normal. It is what the universe needs, actually. Both of these forces needs to live together. The word solving itself, I think, needs to be redefined. I think all of us here are brought up with understanding when you come to a solution, it means whatever we don't like before, gone. I don't think we should live with that definition. Solution actually means to be able to move forward with the most benefit for everyone. Yeah, and it also covers the things about information, and that's how I felt. And coming from a storyteller, I believe stories can have a part in that. So if we keep on telling our stories, telling in the way that it makes people to ask the right questions, because question in communication is always like a chicken and egg story. We need to have a good question to have good answers. You can't have the good answers without a good question. So why don't we use stories, what we want to have, and out of that will come good questions, and good questions will relate to, will direct us to the sources of the right information so that we can live peacefully with each other. And that's how I felt. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Adib. But Hazami, you have the second last word.
Okay, thank you. I think the way forward among the scientific community, we need to build up the science communication ecosystem among us. Because as just Dr. Joan said, it's cross-cutting. You know, physics have to talk to chemistry, chemistry have to talk with biologists, biologists have to talk with engineers, so on and so forth. If we are not talking to each other, we are very silo and giving solutions, then people will not refer to us. We need to change the ecosystem of science communications. That's what I'm trying to bring academy. We are not solution provider. We are solution seekers. If solution provider, I only refer to one expert. And this expert will give whatever solution within what he is experts in. But being a solution providers, we are seeking more and more views. Because I agree, the world is divided. But if we collaborate and cooperate, we can have the best solution. And we only can do that through communicating and connecting. So science communication begin within the scientific community. Then build up the ecosystem for us to branch out with the public, with the government, with the industry. Then only we have the whole holistic communication ecosystem. But we have to strengthen within the scientific community. This is where we have to change the concept of tolerance to respect and accept. Tolerance always, even in Malaysian society, we have Chinese, we have Indian, we have Malay, we have Iban, we have I don't know how many races. But we always been putting up this tolerance concept in our mind, and we always think that when tolerance, one party have to, yes. And if we continuously have this concept, it will never ending these vicious cycles. And there will be one party will not be satisfied. You know how I get this? When we do Foresight 2050, we do the aspiration of what we want Malaysia to be in 2050. I went to Sabah. I said, one pastor just stood up in a workshop. And then he said to me, in Sabah, we cannot have this tolerance concept. What we should have is respect and accept. Because in Sabah family, my brother is a Muslim, I am a Christian, so on and so forth. If we cannot respect and accept, we'll be fighting forever. Same with science communications. Scientists have knowledge, but we also have to respect public opinion. We also have to respect government's things. And how do we bring about things that we want to change the society towards positivity, and how we communicate it. We also have to respect, not to show that we know everything. Yes, we can fly a drone more than 500 kilometers. But this ministry said, no, if you fly more than 500 kilometers, you are going to another jurisdiction. For scientists, doesn't matter, it can fly. Right? But how do we communicate? That is the most important thing. Because when I was in this policy business since 2010, seriously, looking into each ministry, why they are not talking to each other. Scientists say the solution is already in front of their eyes, but they don't want to take it. Because we don't know how to communicate their language, and they don't want to understand our communications. All the crisis things that is happening is because no clear communications. So let's build up this scientific community, science communication ecosystem. Let us equip ourselves with all this and try to learn. It's really amazing. I'm already 56. If not, I will learn more and more. This TikTok, this thing, my daughter, it's amazing. 30 seconds, mama. 30 seconds. You don't talk about vaccine, blah, 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 blah. No, 30 seconds. I said, oh. That's how I reach below 20. How to reach above 20. How to reach below 60. How to reach above 60. There is a different way to communicate. So that's where right time, right methods to the right groups, that's very important, because what we have among the scientific community is knowledge. But if it's not transferred, it's not knowledge to be shared and it's useless. So let's help that. One thing that I want to suggest is to have a science media center whereby we can give this kind of thing, but having a scientist to give layman's word to all the media practitioners. When they write something they understand. For example, we have this Linus issue of rare earth coming from Australia, processed in Malaysia. But the media does not know the difference between radiation and radioactive. All the article tulis semua betul. When they write the article, all radiation. But the symbol is radioactive. Because same what? It's not the same. I said, what Fukushima's incident got to do with the chemical plant? Scientists said, that's why lah, they don't know. Yeah lah, but it's our responsibility to tell them. If not, they keep on using the wrong symbol. NASA put under another symbol, habis, hancur. If we wrongly communicate, public will be misinformed. Once you misinform, until today, we cannot solve this Linus issue. Because it's perception, politics. It's not, technology is not an issue here. So that's how we need to communicate. So that's my takeaway. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Hazami. For someone who did his work experience at the Australian Science Media Centre for 3 months, it's a full circle moment for me to hear that coming from you. I'd just like to end the panel discussion portion of this session by just recapping a little bit about the way forward. We've talked a lot about values that we need to have when we consider communication. A long time ago, we discussed the transition from public understanding of science as a paradigm to public engagement of science. And we realize how important it is today as we navigate through the way society has changed in these years. We discussed the notion of trust, respect, the notion of being able to accept, and coming as a Sabahan myself. Yes, that's very true. We live in a very interesting society on the other side of Malaysia. Thank you, panelists. I'd like to invite all of us to just share a round of applause for our dear panelists that made their time here today. So we're going to proceed to a portion of Q&A. If I can get my colleagues to just grab the mic for the audience. Yeah. Salim. Aini is managing the Zoom room. Dr. Aini is right over there with the laptop. So if there are any questions, there are some from the Zoom room first. But if there are any questions in the room, perhaps you could just raise your hands and just indicate to us that you have a question. But we'll start with questions collected during the chat of the Zoom room. Aini?
All right. So, Assalamualaikum. Hi, everyone. I'm Nurul Aini, currently hosting this webinar on Zoom. So we have one question from Miss Yidi. She's from the Wild Type Media, a science media agency focused on research in Asia. She has a question for Prof. Leach. The question is, when it comes to science awareness, whose role is it to translate research and make it engaging and informative for the public? Does it start from the research institute themselves, or the science ministry, or university communication departments, or the government media, or for profit media? And would you like to share any success story if there's any?
Well, that's a great question. I'll give it a start, and then I'll probably turn over to my more learned colleague. So look, it's everybody's responsibility. I think researchers now take it on as their own to varying degrees of success. Some people are fabulous science communicators. Some need additional training, and that's really an important part of what's going on. Let me answer this by giving an example, maybe not of success, but of a problem that kind of troubles the waters a little bit and kind of, so during COVID in Australia, epidemiologists came forward with various models of how the pandemic was progressing and various solutions involving vaccination. Some of those epidemiologists received death threats. I don't know if there was abuse here in Malaysia for experts that came forward, but that was certainly the case in Australia, and of course in the US, the Fauci he routinely gets death threats, these kinds of things. Okay, now the reason why I think this is an important thing for us to think about is when a epidemiologist, for example, my own institution, receives a death threat, who defends them? They have been brave. They've come forward with their science. They've communicated it well. People are paying attention, so much attention that you're going to get a death threat. Who protects them? And what is really, really interesting, I was involved in a number of conversations with the Academy of Science in Australia, with my own institution, with professional societies. Whose job is it to help that scientist who's been brave enough to communicate well? And nobody could agree on whose responsibility it was. So so the question is such a good one, like whose responsibility is it to communicate? And the fact that we haven't figured out whose responsibility is it to protect or to help when something goes wrong says to me that we don't know the answer to that question, as a science sector, let's say. So my argument, and I've been making this public, and I'm writing a bit about it, is that I think the professional bodies and the academies need to step up because they've been encouraging scientists to come forward and be public. And so now you need that protection. And I went to my own institution and said, people like my learned colleague over here need to also be resourced to provide aftercare, right? So you were talking about how you profile certain scientists and put their messages out, but then what? What happens to that researcher after that happens? And so to be able to resource somebody like yourself to say, okay, well, actually we've got a team. If you are getting threats, we will help you. So it's just an example to show, I think it's such a fabulous question about responsibility, but I think the negative example shows that we don't actually know whose responsibility it is. And I think we're all willing to kind of have a diffuse responsibility. Oh yes, scientists should communicate, science communicators are paid to communicate, all of that stuff, that's great. We're willing to separate that out as a kind of a shared responsibility. We're not actually willing to step up when something goes wrong and say, yes, we do have a shared responsibility to help each other out. We're not quite to that point. So I hope that's a roundabout way of answering that question, because I think we don't know the answer.
Dr. Adib, do you have any thoughts?
I would like to record my what do you call my thanks to you. It's not every day that you got compliment from a real professor in science communication to call me a learned colleague. By no means I'm learned. I have no background media. But let me, since it's a very scientific and adult discourse that we have here, let me make it clear that this question is very leading. I have no idea who the person was or what the intention is, but please understand that this is a very leading question, and I'm following up from what Joan said about there's no such thing as putting a responsibility on someone or something. In the end, what matters is what gets done. And I like the word shared responsibility here. And I think we should start from there. And that's how we can get to the starting point of solving that problem. And I like what Hazami said about perhaps we can follow what the Sabahans are doing, respect and accept. Because any kind of questions can only get answered if it's, like I said before, good answers will follow good questions. And I don't think this is a good question because we haven't solved that shared responsibility part. If you can do that, then only then you can start to try to address this problem. Because talking about responsibility, just to add on to that, it encompasses all sorts of human nature, life, and so on. Talking about finances, you know, who's going to defend that in the court, for example? Who's going to do that? So if we can have a discussion on the shared responsibility part, and only then you can talk about that. And in fact, I would like to answer that question with another question. When you use the word engagement, isn't it the media's role to do that? It's their business to engage readers, not us. You see? You get what I mean? And when you talk about entertaining article, that's for your business to get more clients. So now who has the more profit there when addressing this issue? I would like to ask that instead. I hope again, like coming out from this discussion, we are all adults here. We can talk, we can agree to disagree. And I believe this question is very leading. And I believe the way forward is for us to have another discussion on how to get shared responsibility, and also to be clear on when you talk about engaging, entertaining, who gains the most from it? Let's discuss that first before addressing that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adib. We have a question from the audience. I appreciate if you could share your name and as well as your affiliation and to which panelist would you like to address your question to?
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth. My name is Adina. I'm from Faculty of Medicine, primary care physician myself. My area of research is in health literacy. So I'm not hearing a lot about what the public actually wants, because I think in health, we have been struggling with patient education, health information, and misinformation and disinformation as well. But we found out that actually looking at the patient themselves and see what skills do they have, what kind of languages do they want to listen to, and how they can better engage with the information. For example, we found out that patients do really trust healthcare professional. They want information from them, but healthcare professionals don't have the time to communicate. And then who else then can communicate those things to them? So maybe looking at the public and asking those questions. So Professor Leach, I just want your opinion on that. Thank you.
No, I love that question. And I think that science communication has learned a lot from health communication. I love this idea, you treat the patient in front of you. It's something that people take from primary practice. You treat the patient in front of you. I mean, that's a nice thing to take back into science communication, really, is that you treat the question that somebody's asking, right? You don't tell them what you want. So I think that's really useful. I mean, look, I think we found through the pandemic, our health systems are groaning under the pressure. But I think I hear it like a mantra, okay? There's not enough time. There's not enough time. There's not enough time. And I kind of think, well, maybe it's time to make time. In the sense that, well, in the sense that, academics complain about this all the time, that academic time is free, right? So you charge out everything else when in a research grant, but you don't charge out academic time, right? Because our time is free. There's a sense in which I think we have to be a little bit more honest about that. Communication does take time. And all of the research that I've read in health communication says there's a very, very strong positive correlation between how much time the primary care physician spends with the patient and the outcome. I mean, what more evidence do we need? So now it's up to us to be able to act on that evidence and say, actually, we have plenty of evidence that says if you take the time to communicate to the patient in the way that they want to be communicated, it's win-win-win. Because it's not just the patient, right? It's the family, it's the, et cetera, et cetera. I'm speaking to the choir here, I think, but I think it's a great question. I think there's probably a lot science communication, health communication. That's interesting in and of itself, that we've got two fields. We don't publish in the same journals. Not necessarily even read the same journals, okay? Oh, that's health, I don't do health. I do science. Oh no, I do science. Anyway, it's fairly ridiculous. So I think there's probably a lot of work to be done, a lot of conversations to be had. But the time thing is now it's sneaking into science communication too. Oh yes, if we had the time, we could do it. I think that's got to stop being an excuse, really. Yeah. Yeah.
Viruses, we need to talk about vaccine. If the science, the topic of most concepts,
yeah,
makes it so much.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've been lucky enough to work with some colleagues, at my institution in medicine, And one of the things that they also talk about is as practitioners, like they've got the clinical stuff down. They know the epidemiology. Okay, now please explain how the RNA vaccine works, right? Well, I mean, that's asking people also to step a little bit sideways out of the clinical space into the biomedical space, and that's challenging too. And so, that information also has to be communicated in a way to those practitioners that they can share it. So it's communication on communication, I think, is what you were saying.
Yes, Hazami, please do.
I think there's two ways on how to, I see this from two levels of perspective. When we were, during the pandemic, we are facing this problem, how to convince people to take vaccine. Then we show data from Israel, whereby Israel is the first country in the world that reached 80% and above. And then we share that, we share it to the media, and then for the media to tell the public, you see, Israel get 80% and above, and then their case gone down. So that's how we communicate at the big picture. Then we try to communicate local. We start taking vaccine, and then YB Khairi said, how to show that it is effective? Because the numbers keep on racing during that time. Then brainstorm, we come up with the idea, why don't we show the numbers of people got warded in ICU ward, and also normal ward is decreasing once you touch 80% and above vaccine. The only state that had touched 80% above during that time is only Sarawak. So in a big press conference like this, he shows data, evidence. Rest assured, other states now beginning to open up and want to open more and more vaccine center. So that's how we communicate. That is a big picture of how at national level. One-to-one as a clinician and a patient. During my mother's time, doctors knows everything. You just give us medicine, I eat, I balik, tak baik, I come and meet you again. Hello, what did you give me? Nothing, gone. And then you give another thing. But that era has gone. The society has been educated in their own way. Even government, the era of government knows everything, gone. You have to change the way how you communicate. And you have to show empathy in communication in order to give, how a doctor said, sir, you have a cancer. That's it. Then you went, no, you need to communicate how, why. So these things is very important. So we need to change. In the society of rote learning, I go back to education. That is how we were trained. Subconsciously, we don't realize it, but we have been using that method over and over again in our work life. And how we raise our family, we need to change that. Then only respect and accept can be done. If we don't do that, we are in this vicious cycle over and over again. That's why academy goes stress back to the education, to the culture. If you can do that, we are very open. Yes, we will face different views. More views is better to find the best views rather than just one way. A, use A, then what's next? So we need that choice. So we need to change that. I always go back to our education system and our culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazami. We have one last question from our dear friend in Batik.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. Sufyan from UiTM Shah Alam. My research area is in health communication, but in particular in communication media studies. I'm not from science background, but I'm from social science. I'm interested with Puan Hazami and Dr. Nahrizul, pertaining to public sentiments, the timing, as well as health literacy part. Because how do you strike a balance, my questions, when the timings wasn't right, but information really needs to go out to the public, because there's also political will in that is interplay in that sense. Maybe Prof. Leach can also respond pertaining to international level. So thank you.
Yeah, first, Dr. Adib, since you brought up the timing issue, maybe you would like to take a stab at it first.
Okay, thank you. First things first, again, allow me to speak in terms of philosophically speaking. I think the word balance has been overrated. balance is only meaningful if you can gain something out of it, or everyone can gain something of it. And yet balance has been used to convey the message that you need to be able to have everything at the same time. Who can juggle here? No one can. And I think balance has been overrated a lot, especially in complex questions like this. We understood that, oh, you're not wrong, you're quite right, or you're not wrong, you're quite right. Why don't we balance everything? I think that's not the right approach to do it. Why don't we open up conversation about it? Puan Hazami mentioned something during our COVID, when they discussed, they want to come up with the best solution. This is also another overrated word. I think the best doesn't mean that the rest is wrong. The best at that time means that the country will be able to get out of this faster, or at least at par with everyone else, so that we can start do business with each other again. So that's the best. But yet best, balance, in my mind, has been used wrongly for millennia. So I think, why don't, if you think that balance is the best solution to address this, I think what we need to do is start the conversation, because from there you can see and you can start see to measure which will carry the most weight to be able to get us somewhere. Because in the end, we need to get somewhere out of this solution, out of this problem. And I would like also to mention, now that we're in the last part of it, I think the word pandemic itself is not understood by everyone. It seems that the word pandemic is like a tunnel, you know, where you enter something and there's a way out, and that way out is tangible, 2 years. President Trump says by Easter that year. Because everyone thought pandemic is like a tunnel. Everyone understands the tunnel concept. We go in and we go out somewhere. But I think the onus is also on the scientists, I guess, a bit, to actually say that, look, actually the remaining genetic material of the last flu pandemic is still in the flu outbreaks every year in the States or somewhere. So I think we need to get everyone talking. I think that's the first step. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Adib. Puan Hazami, you want to jump in?
The message is there is no such thing as one size fits all. What balanced to you may not be balanced to me, right? So what is important is everything you do, it has to be customized. That's why it's a lot of work. What work in Sabah does not work in Perak. What work in Perak does not work in Kelantan. Because it's different. You have to understand that. The problem is when we blanket everything. You know, the law, one blanket law. Policy, one blanket policy. It does not work in that manner. Even industry have to change now. The goods that they want to sell, it has to be customized to the needs of the customer. Mass production is depleting. Everything is customized. Every data comes from your handphones. Whatever you Google, whatever you think, people are profiling you. They know what color Dr. Joan likes. And then they will start marketing all that goods, that color to you. That's how customized it is. And that's how the power of marketing 5.0. They don't do billboard anymore. It's all through your phones, through the social media, through your platforms, everything. So it changed. Even in science communication, we need to change how we talk, how we package it, how to do fact sheet. What is fact sheet? One page. How to put everything in one page. All that is skills. Even you see most of the scientist slides, oh God, with all the words, and I don't know which one to see. But if you see communication company do their slides, they're very professional. But why can't scientists do it in the science communication for people to better understanding of your message? So things have to be customized. So these are things that I think we need to have this effort of profiling. People think profiling is negative, but profiling is very important to understand your audience. Even yesterday, when he texted me, I said, who is the audience? What language should I say? You see, so I need to know that, because I can just say from the policy perspective, or maybe it's not relevant, or I can say from the scientist perspective, maybe it's not also relevant. All of us here in Universiti Malaya are all academics and scientists. So how do we strike a balance? So balance is very subjective. So we have to know when to do it and how to see it and make sure it localized and inclusive. So that is what we need to do, especially in Malaysia. Very divide with race, religions, different culture, things like that. Language, you go to Kelantan, you can't even know what their dialect is. Sometimes I also cannot understand. So because I'm not a Kelantanese, so that is how colorful we are. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Joan, you have something to add?
Yeah, so I'm going to try a different tack on this one. It's all really interesting. So in the book that you mentioned at the very beginning, I wrote a book with a colleague, Fabian Medvecchi, about the ethics of science communication. And one of the principles that we discuss is called kairos. And of course, I don't know, it's a classical Greek tradition, just referring to timing. I'm sure there's other traditions that kind of work with the same concept, because it seems kind of fundamental. The important thing about it, though, is it's a normative concept, okay? And so, and your question is so good, because it kind of gets us back to that normative way of thinking. If you do it then, you're not doing it then, and there's a cost to that, and that is a moral cost. And I think science communication is used to feeling very good about itself, and they say, oh yes, well 64 people came to my event, and were enlightened by me. And we measure ourselves in those sorts of successes, but have let ourselves off very, very easy on the normative costs when things go wrong. And I think COVID has pointed out that actually poor science communication can have a very, very high cost indeed, lives. And so your point, I don't think there's an answer, because the question itself is normative, it's a moral question. If this, not that. And so how do we, so it isn't, I understand why you use the word balance, because in a sense, in a normative question, you want to kind of be able to weigh things. And we're not very good at that. I don't think the field has been very good at that. And that's what we argue in the book. So I just wanted to kind of pick that up, because that's just really, yeah, great question.
Thanks, Joan. So to wrap things up, I know that there's a lot to unpack today. We will try to make the recording available online if you guys would like to review this. But I would like to thank the panelists again for all that we've learned today. If you guys could just share a round of applause for them. To sum things up, we really talked a lot about the complexity of science communication. We tend to think of science communication as a one-way street. Scientists playing a bigger role, telling their stories. But we realized that it's a much more nuanced conversation that we have on top of that. We don't just tell, we need to listen. We need to know what stories they want to hear. That's how we become good storytellers, right? We need to meet a demand. It's not just about telling what we want them to hear, right? Especially in the time of the COVID pandemic, we realized that it's not just about us as scientists, telling them what to do. Is more about how can we meet them at their level? How can we put out good stories that, would just challenge all the other noise that's out there, and be able to actually, sort of have our own say in the entire conversation, and be accepting as well as trust, and help to build that trust with the evidence-based science. So I would like to end on that note. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I would like to pass the time back to our MC Salim.
Okay, thank you to all the panelists for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sure that all of us have learned a lot today. Okay, therefore, as a token of our heartfelt and gratitude for all the panelists and moderator, May I invite Associate Professor Dr. Ng Boon Kwee to kindly present a memento to our panelists. Yeah. Okay, so firstly, I invite Professor Dr. Joan Leach. Thank you. All right. Secondly, Puan Hazami Habib. Thank you. And thirdly, to Associate Professor Dr. Nahrizul Adib. And last but not least, to our moderator, Dr. Kenneth. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause once again to all the panelists and moderator. Okay, before we move on to the next agenda, I would like to invite our VIP guests in front for the photography session. Do you want to take a picture first? Thank you very much. All right, coming to our final agenda, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Ng Boon Kwee to deliver the closing remarks. Please welcome.
All right, thank you, MC, Dr. Salim. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciations to the panelists and our moderator for their valuable inputs and the sharing this morning. My deepest gratitude goes to all the attendees, the participants in these forums, both physically in this hall, as well as those follow us live stream online. I've been informed by the secretariat that there is about 40 participants in our live stream platform. With the combinations of our panelists with a wide background range from academics, policymaker, as well as corporate communications, our discussion this morning provide valuable inputs, concerns, and policy insights in the field related to science communications, especially during and post-era of COVID-19. Not to forget that the participants answer during the Q&A sessions wonderful questions from our audience. And I believe that we are still in the learning curve in the field of science communications. This is also very in line with the newly launched National Science and Technology Policy by Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, as well as the 1010S MySDIE frameworks established by Academy of Sciences Malaysia. Thus, I think it is timely for us to initiate, design, and conduct a comprehensive and targeted academic programs in science communications. I would like to use this platform as an opportunity to introduce a forthcoming Master by Course program that will be hosted in the Faculty of Science, Universiti Malaya. We are expecting this course to be conducted in February or March year 2023, Master of Science Communication and Public Engagement. In Malay, Sarjana Komunikasi Sains dan Keterlibatan Awam. We are currently waiting official approval from the Ministry of Higher Education. And we stay positive and believe that you will get the official approval very soon. Just for your information, this program, forthcoming programs, consists of both theoretical concepts as well as practical elements of science communications. These are some of the courses we designed for the program. Principle in Science Communication and Public Engagement, Science and Media in Multicultural Society, Science Policy and Public Impact, Big Data in Science Communications, Controversial Issues in Science and Technology, Systemic Thinking for Decision Making, Social Innovations, Digital Laws and Communication Ethics, Managing Science and Technology Events, Science Diplomacy, and also, as usual, research methods and research project that is based on client-based project. For your information, the design of this program, we are glad that we are getting input and support for the multiple agencies. It's a co-creation process by the multiple stakeholders, includes Pusat Sains Negara, Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, MASTIC, ASM, Young Scientist Network, IKIM, Petronas, Predatory Negara, Mabik, WWF, Proton, this for the corporate, Telekom Malaysia Berhad, Harta Lega. And for the media, we receive inputs and their support from majalah.science.com, Apa Langit, and Aja. So thanks for the inputs and support from these stakeholders. And we try to make this program as comprehensive as possible, not only for the academics, but also have the impact on the industry and society. So very soon, with the launch of this program, we hope that UC Malaya will be joining the world leading university in the field of science communications, together with our friends, Australian National University, NUS, University of Adib, Imperial College, Manchester University. So looking forward, for your participations. We will give you updates on the progress of this exciting new program. So thank you very much from the Department of Science and Technology Studies, and hope that we can still meet in our forthcoming events in the near future. On behalf of the Department of Science and Technology Studies, again, thanks to all the panelists, moderators, staff, supporting staff, attendants, and